Moving to France expert. Fab is like your immigration GP. We're here to answer all your questions: visas, residency, healthcare, driving, taxes, properties, and much more. We navigate the complexities of France to help you embrace the French lifestyle you've always imagined. Although we are experts in the immigration industry and have been working in this space since 2015, none of what we say should be considered legal or financial advice. It is also worth noting that the immigration industry is an ever-evolving field, so things that are relevant today might be outdated or inaccurate when you actually move to France. Fab's main source of revenue is insurance through our brand, Fab French Insurance. Our main goal is to ultimately help you move to France, as we only sell insurance to clients applying for a visa, a residency permit, or those with a French address. During this session, you can ask any questions you want. However, we will not answer long questions to keep the pace fast. We also won't be able to address questions related to personal or very specific issues, but rest assured, we can get in touch after this session to either advise or refer you to one of our trusted partners. And now it's time to get this event started. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you find our answers valuable. Our greatest reward would be to be a part of your journey to moving to France. And hopefully, it starts with this session today. We will pause briefly to allow all registrants to join. The session will begin shortly.
And we're now live. Hello, everyone. So I thank you for being here this evening or this morning, depending on where you are. This is going to be a busy event in light of recent development in the US. So, I'm here this evening with Adrian from Adrian Leeds. She'll introduce herself in a bit. I wanted to start by saying we'll try, so you can ask your questions in the Q&A box of this webinar. We'll try to answer as many and as much as possible. For those who we won't be able to address the questions, rest assured that we'll also send you a follow-up email offering you the opportunity to get in touch with either me, the team, or Adrian and the team as well. We'll also share all of your questions in the Q&A box with Adrian and her team so that maybe they can also get back in touch directly with you. And yeah, so I'll start by introducing myself. So I'm Fabien, founder and managing director at Fab French Insurance and Fab Expats. So I've been helping English-speaking migrants moving to France since 2015. As tonight's event is going to be a bit political, I must disclose I'm from a left-leaning family. I've been raised by my grandparents. My grandfather was deported during World War II. And first, a cultural difference. In France, the left wing is red. So I'm wearing red, which is not your red, I'm aware of. And blue actually is right wing in France. So that's why, I mean, for you guys, I wear a blue-ish shirt though. Also, I wanted to say that we want to help you to move to France. This is the goal. And me and Adrian have been working together for a while as well. And we're here tonight to share also our views, which are only our views, just opinions, but still of what it entails now that, the elections have passed. So maybe on to you, Adrian. Maybe you can tell us who you are.
Thank you, Fabienne. I am so pleased to be here, and I want to thank you for inviting us to do this webinar post-election. My company is the Adrian Leeds Group. We've been around for more than 20 years. We've been helping people move to France for, more than 20 years we've been doing this. Our primary business is property, helping people find property to either rent or purchase. We call it French property the American way. But what we really do is assist people in strategizing on how to go ahead and make the move over from the very beginning, ending with, of course, whether they rent or make a purchase. And it can be anywhere in France. We are, along with my associate, Patty Sadowskis, who is on, she's, maybe Patty will show herself for just a minute. There's Patty Sadowskis. We've been doing individual consultations to help people strategize and organize themselves to get their visas, to then make the move over in the simplest, easiest way. And here we are talking post-election. By the way, it is early for me. It is 8 a.m. for me. I am in Hawaii on the island of Maui because my daughter is about to give birth to her first child. I'm already getting welled up as a future grandmother. I'm really experiencing life in the U.S. firsthand, even though Maui is, well, very, very blue. It's a really interesting place because we almost didn't feel the elections in a way because people are so secure in their left-leaning position here. So it's been sort of fascinating that there's not a lot of there was absolutely no conversation on election day. I attended a birthday party, and no one talked about it at all, which I found highly unusual. If I were in Paris, we'd all be on the phone or on text messages going a bit nuts. But anyway, what did you think of the outcome?
Yeah, well, this was a surprise that he won by such a long shot. It is also interesting to see how different world leaders have been reacting to the news. France, for example, basically.
Yeah, what did Macron have to say?
Well, he congratulated him for being elected. Actually, before we start this event, we were actually chatting in the practice room, and Adrian and I, and so we were actually talking about this and say that basically I think Macron, basically Donald Trump has built some of his argumentation against Macron was saying, like, basically when he was president the first time around, Macron had passed some set of laws which were about to tax US companies operating in France. And basically, apparently, Donald Trump called him and said, okay, Macron, you can't do that, or I'll enforce 100% tariff on red wine and champagne going to America. And so apparently changed Macron's mind. But basically, this is something that Trump did use during his campaign recently. So I think Macron is neither blind nor deaf. So I think he saw that. And I think he's just playing nice. But deep down.
Yeah, but do you think the outcome of the elections will affect how the French government views Americans and American immigrants?
The Americans, no. I think, basically, if anything, we saw that Macron also did, over the years, create a set of rules and regulations that are like pro-Americans, whatever that was actually Trump in office or Biden. And even before, when Macron was just like a minister, and I think Macron really is pro US migrants, and if anything, he wants to help US expats move to France. We see that with the tax treaty, which is so favorable to is actually unique. We only have such an amazing tax treaty with the Americans. No one else.
The French-American tax treaty is by far the best one in Europe and could be the best in the world between the US and any other country.
For retirees, it's almost a tax haven. Yeah.
Right. It's one of the things that we seriously benefit from because retirees who move over to France are not taxed at all on their pensions or their dividends. And if they're in non-taxable states, could very well spend a lot less tax money living in France than they ever did in the United States, believe it or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, and
They could
property
actually end up paying
rent.
less tax.
Yeah, and property income would also remain tax liable in the US, and so yeah, it's kind of nice. So actually, well, I suppose because it's also well, we also want to shed light to positive news in a way. So and we're here to speak about France. So Adrian, you obviously you are a US expat yourself. So why France, and what makes France or made France such an appealing destination for Americans, or what makes it even more appealing like now or today?
I came over 30 years ago. When I came to France, it was only because I had just completely fallen in love with Paris and ended up traveling to Paris every year to the point where my then husband and I said, we really need to come and test it out. So we came for 1 year. Well, 1 year was turned into 30. I mean, because after 1 year, it's impossible to go in reverse and to go back to living with your blinders on in a way, and to go back to a lifestyle that I can no longer really agree with or enjoy. And the longer I'm here, the more I realize how I'm less and less of not really an American. I'll always be an American. It's really important because that's the homeland. But how I view life now is very, very different than the way it was before. I'm going to be doing a webinar on the cultural aspects, which is probably the single biggest challenge when making the move over is crossing the cultural divide, because everything else is rather mechanical. So even though, France is highly bureaucratic, right? We all know that, highly administrative. You have to go through a lot of hoops. Things are not as simple or as fast as they are in the US. But the ability to get a visa is actually really easy. The ability to physically make the move to find property is something we help people do. All of those things for me are really just mechanical. And the hardest thing of all is to take your American default mode, right? Cross the big pond and plop yourself in France and say, okay, now I have to think and behave like a French person in order to really manage life here. I think that's the biggest challenge of all.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, it is culturally completely different. Like from a French perspective, I don't know, like I see Nani. Oh, we didn't introduce. Sorry, Nani and Patty. That's Nani from my team, is also a US expat from Atlanta, Georgia. She's been around for 25 years, I think. So not near as you, but close.
Not quite as long, but okay.
Yeah, and she had it on hard mode because she moved to France pregnant and in the north of France. So that was hard. That was hard at first. And I think Patty, you introduced Patty, or yeah, she showed herself. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah, sorry, Nani, I forgot. Yeah, I forgot to introduce you.
But in terms of the advantages, I mean, we can go down the list. I mean, from the tax treaty, number one. So then there's, okay, I'm in Maui and sticker shock has got me. The price of everything, given that Hawaii is a little more expensive than the mainland. I saw Ely coffee on the grocery store shelf for $17.99, which, if you're in a French grocery store, is about $7.49 by comparison. Okay. Everything is double and triple the cost. It's shocking. So we know that when you make the move over, your pensions, your salaries, your income is going to stretch, because it can cost you half as much to live in France as it does in the US. Whenever I speak to our clients and I ask them, well, how much are your property taxes? And they tell me it's almost always about 10 times what our property taxes are in France. When I ask them about their medical costs, oh my God, medical care is an enormous issue. Medical care in the United States is easy, 10 times what it is in France, but it's also nowhere near the quality that it is in France. You know, healthcare has been voted, France healthcare has been deemed number one in the world by the WHO year after year after year. And as someone who can attest to it, it's absolutely the case. And I think that's because it's not based on profit. You know, the US healthcare system is based on profit. So the
Yeah, how much
sicker
are you
you
willing to pay
are,
to stay alive? Yeah.
well, yeah, but the sicker you are, the more money everybody makes. Whereas because you have, you know, a healthcare system that is supported by the French government, the healthier you are, the more money they save. So hey, it's no wonder why the French live a whole lot longer than Americans do.
And also, I like that France has like a two-tier health care system, but also it's all one big thing. Like you can go private or public most of the time. Well, not for dentists, for example, but like you can go into a private hospital, a clinic, or a public hospital. But also, like there is like a scale that the state is has defined and is heavily monitoring and kind of enforcing indirectly. And basically, the state will refund the index, whatever you go public or private. So that means even when you go private, you get quite a fair bit refunded. And obviously, it kind of keeps the prices low as well, because people won't pay out of pocket too much money in France. It's 50 euros out of pocket would be seen as outrageous if you go for a consultation.
I'll tell you a story. Okay. Basically, you can top up your French healthcare, your French carte vitale with a mutuelle insurance policy, right? A top up insurance.
Yeah.
So my top up insurance policy, which is 100% coverage with no deductible, at my age, and I'm over the age of 70, is 1,800 a year, 1,800 euros a year for 100% coverage. So last year I did the math, and what I saved using the French healthcare system, which pays about what, 70%, right? Tell me if I've got the numbers right.
Yeah, 70%
It'll
of
pay
an
up to
index,
70%.
because there's often a misconception. Although when you have both, like the state plus the mutual, you always have an option free of charge. So it's a bit of a confusing system. And by the way, the French don't understand the system. They just know, like you probably, they used to be using it and they know it works, you know. But understanding the system becomes a French bureaucratic problem.
Yeah. Well, it's complicated because if it's not complicated, the French aren't happy. Let's face it, right?
You know why?
It's no fun if it's simple.
We need to have to have ways and reasons to protest. You know, otherwise, what will we do?
But what I figured out is that what I saved in the French system is what my mutual cost me, which makes it like a zero wash, right?
Yeah.
It's
And you know, I
fantastic.
think the bottom line here is that the general idea with the French healthcare system is that it's up to you. You always will have an option. I mean, from where you're from, it's safe to say free of charge. Because again, if you have a 50 euros out of pocket, that would be seen as outrageous. But like for dentistry, for example, even if you go to the most expensive dentist in France, that guy will have the mandatory obligation to provide you with a quote that's 100% refunded and basically with no out-of-pocket expenses for you. Sure, that's probably going to be the male-based crown something, and you may want to have the ceramic based and something fancier, obviously. But basically, you have the choice. So, well, you always have a free option. And then if you want something fancier, well, then you can just pay out of pocket for the difference. Same for the glasses. You know, you will have a pair of spectacles free of charge. Obviously, if you buy Gucci, first, this will come in. I'll come personally say, no, Gucci is Italian. No, you don't buy that. You buy Dior if you want France, but not Gucci. And this, so, but the site wants sponsor
eyeglasses. On eyeglasses, okay. You know, I have an array of crazy, fabulous eyeglasses thanks to my French optique shop, and the French lenses, okay, are expensive. They're much more expensive than the U.S. lenses are. I have progressives, but they are by far better. The quality is amazing. So it is probably the one thing I think that seems more expensive than most things are good optical glasses.
Yeah, well,
but I mean, still, I get reimbursed partially by my mutuelle.
Yeah, and well, actually, glasses might be Well, not the lenses, the spectacles themselves
Hmm.
might be the only thing where personally I think France is a bit expensive. Like for example, should you buy in the UK, that's half the price. So
Hmm.
but still it's super cheap compared to the US and would be again, and you still have the refund from the state. So that would be
Exactly.
still a very good deal. So
Okay, but here's the way I look at it, Fabien. It's my face, okay? It's really important. So
no, it
it's
is,
the
it
one
is.
place I'm going to spend more money.
No, but yeah, I mean, again, that's what I was saying. The general idea is that, well, same with dentistry. You probably don't want middle base crown, like, no one does. But basically, this is an option you get for free. And that's why France is so attractive because the general idea, again, is that health should never be an issue. Like you should never renounce to get to a doctor or to see a physician or whatever because like you don't have the money or to go to the hospital. Like everything's for free, or you'd have an option that's kind of for free.
Okay, here's the major difference. Okay, in France, healthcare is not a privilege, it is a right.
Oh yeah, it
So
seems right.
even when you come over with a visitor visa, right? After 90 days, you can apply to be on the French healthcare system. And even though you haven't paid into the system, France is going to take care of you. That's
This
amazing.
is even
And
better than it's even better than a right because it's an obligation. That's PUMA. Like usually when you apply into French healthcare, you do so through a process called PUMA, which means Protection Universelle Maladie. And that means what it means. It's universal. So that means everyone should be
right,
part of the French.
everybody,
And that's what the French thinks.
everybody.
Everyone should be part of the French healthcare system. Well, everyone in France. You have to come to France to get that, though. This is the
Listen, I can't get my head around the fact that Americans don't want this kind of system. And the only thing I can imagine is that there are too many people making too much money and they're never going to change it.
one of my best friend is a pharmacist. This is actually something we do very often, like during consultations where people have ongoing conditions or some condition that they want to take care of, but they'd be moving to France and they're like, okay, well, how much would that cost in France until I can join the healthcare system? So I asked him about the medicine. So very often they gave me the prescription from their GP or MD in the US, and 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 I sent that to my friend, and he looks at this. First, half of the medicine there would not be sold in France because it's a medicine that's 10 times more expensive than the one that we would sell in France. So we would sell that, but a different, like, I'm not technical, like another molecule or something, or a generic version of the medicine that's 10 times cheaper. So the medicine that you have in the US very often is only in the US actually, or in Canada, but basically it's only in America. And we would not buy that in Europe in general, or in France in particular. And so that's also a different mindset. Because sure, the drug is available, but that's usually not the one we would prescribe because it's so expensive and it keeps the labs making profits. That's basically also, I think there is like a loop where GP or MD in the US, they prescribe drugs, which also, well, as it happens, would make a lot of profits in terms of, they're very expensive. And that's not the same. In France, it's actually illegal for a sale agent working for a lab to go to a GP, a French general practitioner, and actually try to sell them a product or try to give them an incentive. It's illegal in France. It used to be
It's
legal.
so refreshing. Have you ever seen the ads for drugs in the US? The TV commercials
Oh,
for
yeah.
drugs where they tell you all these fabulous things that they're going to do. And then there's a long list of disclaimers of all the terrible things it's going to do for you. And then of course everybody's making money, just for the promotion of it. But anyway, let me ask you a question about insurance. When someone has applied for the visa, right? Whatever visa it is, usually most of our clients are looking for visitor visas, the carte de séjour visiteur. You actually have good policies for them to satisfy getting the visa, right? Because you have to have you have to have a health insurance for 1 year, correct?
Yeah, well, so for those who seek residency in France, yes, they have to have a 1 year insurance, and this is often a trick as well because um, I mean, France is very flexible. France is very flexible, especially again, this is political, so especially from you coming from the US, Because, for example, Airbnbs in theory aren't visa compliant, but in real life, if you come from the UK, that's going to be rejected. If you come from the US, they're usually happy with you using an Airbnb, although it's not visa compliant. But same for insurance. Insurance coming from the UK or some other places, it has to be private medical insurance. Actually, the exact same type of policy you have in the US, although it's going to be much cheaper. So we've created a policy that's as cheap as it gets. It's actually the cheapest you can find, and we even refund the difference if you find cheaper policy. However, most of you can use travel insurance as well, and that's going to be accepted most of the time. The difference is travel insurance doesn't cover you in your country of residency. And the minute you apply for a French visa, well, the minute you move to France and apply for the CPAM, which is Social Security, which, by the way, is healthcare for us in France. That's how we call healthcare, we call it Social Security. The minute you apply into this, the state knows, and the insurance company knows, you are a resident in France. And that voids travel insurance, for example, making the situation illegal potentially. We've had the case, not often. We've seen more than 10,000 visas over the years now. We've only seen that twice, so it's not often. But we did see the case where it caused a visa problem because they realized the guy was actually on something that wasn't visa compliant. So I'm not playing the fear-mongering card. It's not often, but it does happen. And also, I've seen that much more often, though, where then you want to make a claim, and if it's a big one, then the insurance company realize you're a resident. And it's like, oh, but that doesn't cover you. So that's why we have the cheapest private medical insurance. We can't compete with travel insurance, but it's the cheapest travel medical insurance. And we've battle tested this with American expats for like, well, it's basically since 2016, we've been doing more than 500 policies for Americans every year pretty much since COVID. Yeah.
Fabien, a lot of our clients ask about pre-existing conditions. I mean, now I know that when you're on the French healthcare system, France covers you regardless of pre-existing conditions.
And the top up regardless as well. Yeah.
Right. But what about for the health insurance policy for their visas? How does that play? It just means the policy is more expensive?
Yeah. There's two ways to look into that. Either you want to cover everything, which indeed will end up with quite the loading. Well, depends on what you have, obviously. But first, you'll have to go through a medical questionnaire, and then that either apply exclusions or a loading on the premium. Honestly, France is depends on what you have, and that's why we have consultations as well to try to figure out what's the most relevant option. But most of the time, France is so cheap. It's probably better. You're probably better off not trying to cover this and just pay out of pocket up until you're part of the French system, because again, it's going to happen so quickly. Well, just so that they understand, you can apply after 90 days, but you're not part of the French system straight away. It's like
it's administration. It's bureaucracy. Yeah. It takes
6-7 month processes to be anticipated. So yeah,
exactly. So you have to wait 90 days before you can apply to be on Puma to get your carte vitale. But then it takes several months.
Yeah. So worth knowing. And again, that's why usually my advice is to try to get, I'd say the cheapest visa compliant policy. Well, the policies such as ours, because again, we're brokers, so we have other plans, but the best seller by far is the cheapest plan because obviously, but also there is another thing for those who have ongoing conditions. Although you won't be part of the French, you won't have the social security number, which is your healthcare gold ticket, until probably 9-10 months into your relocation total. However, there's a bit of a gray area because, it depends when your application is considered to have been completed. But let's say you find the application after 90 days and it's perfect straight away. Then potentially, if you've had any big claims in the meantime, you can claim those expenses back as well, back to the initial application date.
Okay, so I just want to put this subject to bed because I know that we could talk about healthcare and insurance probably the entire webinar, but I don't want to do that. Because we want to talk also about some of the other benefits of making this move to France. right? So from a French perspective, what do you see? How do you see it benefit Americans from your perspective? I know what my perspective is.
Yeah, well, first, the French are very expat friendly. Again, on average, they're a douche, but on average, they're very expat friendly. Whatever you're in a big city or in rural France, I have tons of anecdotes where people have been so welcome, so welcome, friendly neighbors, and all of that. Um, well,
They do call the American passport the golden passport. I was told that by an immigration, one of the fonctionnaires.
Well, that I've never heard of, but as a French, I can tell you, there are two things actually culturally. Growing up in France, first, from a very young age, uh, we're being taught that the Americans are allied. Like, whatever from the American Revolution, well, we could say we
Oh,
came to the
right.
rescue to World War I, World War II. And this is something, like obviously growing up, you learn about these pieces of history and we're being taught that over and over again. So
Well, we've
that's,
always been allies. I
yeah,
mean,
but
we've
I
always
think
been allied.
basically all the French alive nowadays have been through this kind of education. So that's why the French, I think, are so US friendly. I mean, the
You
general
mean
public.
compared to British, compared to UK?
Oh, well, the French are well, actually, growing up, we've also been taught like the Brits have always been enemies. So that's why it's a different mindset. Although personally, I like both, but I know, like that would be different. Actually, the French are terrible with English. And same as me,
Well, the
I couldn't pick up.
Americans can be terrible with French.
Yeah, but we couldn't pick up. We won't be able to pick up the accent. So, like a pro tip would be when you're in France and you speak English, make sure that you make that understood that you're actually U.S. English and not British English. That would change people's behavior
Okay, so in
sometimes.
other words, we should let them know that we're American and not British. That's
That may
that's
help.
really
Yeah,
important.
that does help a lot. Yeah.
Okay, and so maybe you can answer this better than I can, because I know that it's very hard for an American to really fully integrate French, into the French society, into French culture. I mean,
No,
I know why from my perspective, but why do you think from your
no, I mean,
perspective?
culturally speaking, I think actually, well, there are a few, obviously, there are quite a lot of differences, but I mean, as people, for example, the French would see the Brits as being cold, but would see the American as being warm as well. And we think, again, it's a French thing, but we think the Americans and the French are quite alike in terms of personalities. So, well, again, there are cultural differences. Like we don't hug. We actually would
Mhm.
see that as weird. I was like, no, no, you just don't hug. But we would do la bise and think it's normal. So it's. But we also have cultural ties with Americans. That I mean, one of the pro tip actually also would be to be mindful and actually, well, working with experts is twice as relevant because same growing up in France, there is a saying I keep on hearing this one, but like I've heard a lot when someone tried to sell me something and I think it's overpriced. There's actually a common popular saying in France, which is, "You think an American? You think I'm an American?" It's a very popular saying. Basically, when something's overpriced, we would say, "Do you think I'm an American?" Like
Um,
because we think you're so wealthy
uh-oh.
that basically but so
That the Americans can afford it, so
exactly. So that's why I mean over time that would be completely fine. Like I mean you're on the embodiment of that. But that's why working with people that are already in France that know the French market, that understand about French culture and the kind of prices that should be expecting to pay is of paramount importance at first because otherwise
well,
they'll know you're American and they can try to benefit from that.
okay, look, it's certainly true with property.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, we know, okay, that the American culture is, like, don't nickel and dime me, just I'll pay the price and include everything. That's the way Americans think, right? And so we know that Americans are willing to pay a little more for a property that's move-in ready, for example, that's well done, that's been well managed, because it's worth it to them
Hmm.
for their own, for their own peace of mind, right? And so I know also that the French who are selling their property are target the American market because
Oh,
they think they can get a higher price out of the American market. Now, okay, all that being said, when we're working with our clients, of course, we're going to ensure that they're not going to be taken advantage of.
yeah, that's
Right?
exactly.
Okay, absolutely. But at the same time, there's a value in it. So there's even a value. I mean, our clients obviously see that there's a value in our assisting them, bringing them through the entire process, doing all the due diligence, providing all the good resources, and acting like our own form of insurance. It's not medical insurance, it's property purchasing insurance.
No, but I
It's a
mean, this
little,
the process super secure in France. Maybe we can very quickly, because it can't be as fast as the US, but it's quite secure, isn't it? The French
I'm sorry,
buying process, the French property buying process.
oh, well, it's certainly not fast, but it's safe and sure. Every I is dotted, every T is crossed. You're working with notaires who are looking, through a tremendous amount of documentation. We do the same. There's very little risk in making that purchase. So the notaires, in effect, replace what you would call in the US the title insurance company, right? Who's ensuring that the title is clear. And the notaires perform that function. So I think it's a very low risk opportunity
Well,
to purchase property in France.
speaking of that, the French, I'd say, housing market and property prices in general is is quite different from the US. Like, for example, France has never experienced like a 30% crash or like even a 5% crash. Well, actually, the 5% discount is seen as almost a crash in France. So,
Well, I can explain that actually. One of the reasons that the French property market is so stable, one of the big differences is that there are no bidding wars that take place here because the seller is morally obligated to accept asking price. And asking price is highly defined because within this urban markets, it's very easy to know really exactly what a property is worth or close to exact what a property is worth. And then the French are not hagglers. They don't want to overprice a property and expect someone to really bargain heavy on it. There's usually only about 5% built in for negotiation. So there's not a lot of room anyway, and that prevents the bubbles from happening. So the market stays really stable. And I just wrote about this because the new report came out for, particularly for Paris. Prices across France are really at an all-time low because of the high interest rates in the last couple of years, with the exception of Nice and the environs around Nice and the PACA region, where a lot of people moved to the south because of weather during COVID and having more space for their money. And so the South has experienced increase in prices, but the rest of the country is not. And Paris prices are really low right now. And this is a wonderful time to grab a bargain because the rate of exchange is, I didn't look this morning, but I think it's about 108 to the $1.08 to the euro, something like that. So you've got a good rate of exchange. You've got low property prices, and it just makes it an ideal situation right now to invest.
okay, yeah. So no, right. The thing with the French property market as well is that I think there's also the mortgages, the way it's structured here, as a massive impact on the stability of the French housing market, like reposition, or well, they do exist, but they're marginal in France because there's only flat rates on mortgages. It's only fixed rates, sorry, and that's it. So you can have like a 20 years fixed rate mortgage. It's very difficult to get the mortgage. They expect you to be making actually 3 times the mortgage you'll get. They don't consider the income you'll be generating. I mean, if you do that as an individual, but basically meaning that the overall structure of the mortgage is so difficult to get and so stable that it also create like a stability in the property market because the underlying mortgages are super stable as well. So
Well, and the rates right now, though, in France are still about half of what they are in the US.
oh yeah, and the rates are
because they're
lower. I mean,
hovering around
it's
4%.
fixed rate
Now,
and it's
okay.
lower. Yeah.
Okay, but to get a mortgage for an American, unfortunately, thanks to FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, which was enacted as part of the Hire Act in 2010 and places, regulations on foreign financial institutions. A lot of the banks aren't willing to lend to Americans. So we do have a mortgage broker who can work with Americans with a few select banks, but they really don't want to lend to people who are over the age of 60 and to people who are self-employed. However, if you're under the age of 60 and if you're salaried, then this is an opportune moment to apply and get a mortgage to make a purchase in France.
Do you think, Adrian, that well, post US elections now, I mean, there's going to be some differences, for example, in terms of inheritance laws, or like if people move to France, what about their assets in the US? How would that be treated? Or do you think anything might change, or what may happen about that?
Well, if those changes happen, it certainly won't have anything to do with the US elections or US policy. It's going to all be French policy, basically. I mean, I don't see the FATCA situation changing on the US side at all, regardless of who's in office. I mean, the truth is that Donald Trump's a wild card. Okay. He makes a lot of promises. He lies every word out of his mouth almost. So it's really hard to tell what he's going to do. I think that's a crapshoot.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have to watch what happens on that end very, very carefully. But on the French side, I would personally love to see some reforms, particularly with the inheritance laws, because the inheritance laws, inheritance taxes, do really affect American residents. Once you're tax resident in France, then the inheritance tax laws apply to your worldwide assets, not just your French assets. So we recommend to our clients that they plan in advance by talking to our tax specialists so that they know going in how to circumvent that. So, for example, I'm in the process of moving most of my assets over to my daughter as best as I can so that she won't have inheritance taxes to pay. And so there are ways to do it. There are ways to minimize it or circumvent it, but you just have to plan in advance. And we help all of our clients do that and talk to the right advisors. So, there's also another thought, and that is that when you're dead, you're dead. Okay. Maybe you just don't care and you let everyone fend for themselves. And you can also view life that way. But if you want to make sure your kids are not going to have a lot of out of pocket when you go, then you can just prepare in advance. It's all doable. It's all doable.
A quick question that I've seen we can address here, like the stats on approval denial on long stay visas. Well, it depends, but on visitor visas, they're quite high. I've seen more than 98%, as far as I'm concerned, with the client we've dealt with.
Absolutely. Right.
So, yeah.
Anytime we've seen a denial, it's only been sort of a paperwork issue. It's always been just something they didn't have in their paperwork correctly, or they asked for the wrong kind of visa. Now that we see a lot.
Although this is one of the things that might change, though, because due to political reasons, I mean, again, I don't see any change happening in the next few months. But depending on what's going to happen on the US side of politics, maybe the French politicians will react to that. And again, you have to remember that visas are highly political tools. Look at what happened during, when Russia declared war to I don't even think they declared war, but basically when the war broke out, we turned out the switch. And it was like all of a sudden, I used to be dealing with Russian expats at the time, and all of a sudden, they turned out the switch. So it is not something that France will do, definitely not, but they may decide to tighten the rules if Donald Trump does things that France doesn't appreciate in like 3 months time, 6 months time, 1 year time. You don't know. So if that may speed up some of your plans, but if you're in a position where you could actually move to France, I'd say it's probably best to do things when you still know exactly what the circumstances are, because this could change in a few years. Although I really think, again, the French government and the French themselves, they love Americans, they're pro-Americans. And so I don't think it's going to be a massive issue, but better safe than sorry.
I can tell you right now that the French website, okay, visa website, is probably overloaded, okay, as a result of the elections. It's probably going to break down, and getting an appointment is going to be very difficult. So I think everyone should be prepared for this to take a little bit more time. And then, and maybe if there really is an onslaught, maybe they will look at quotas. But they haven't. As far as we know, we have not seen any kind of quotas. Retirees are getting them very easily.
From the US, I really don't think that they'll ever come up to something like that. Don't know if I've told the audience, but my former stepdad was a French MP, left wing, and has been an MP for 25 years. So I've been in the French Parliament and see all those guys. Although that was like before Macron got elected, and I don't think this is the French way of thinking. Like you are the kind of immigrants that France and the French want. So I don't ever think they'll be doing something like that. They might again. There are some tolerances today that may help. They may end up tomorrow, like the Airbnb situation, for example. There's no reason for now, but that's the kind of flexibility that might be on the table. But apart from those things, I really don't think that they'll change anything. And actually, if anything, I think they'll make things more. They'll try to make things easier for Americans moving to France.
I was just going to say, I have a feeling it's going to be open arms. Like, okay, you guys, we do want you here. Okay, because look, Americans come with their money, with their education, with their skills. Okay, with their love of France. They're not gonna land in France and live in a tent on the street.
Yeah, although at the border, you might be stopped at the border, and depending whatever you drink or you don't drink. But so if you drink, they might try to get a blood sample to test for your wine intake, see if you're French compatible. And for those that don't drink, they may blindfold you.
You mean whether you're drinking California wine versus French wine?
That won't work. And for those that don't drink, maybe they'll blindfold you and have you go through a cheese tasting, to see if you're French compatible.
Is that it? Okay.
But apart from that, you should be safe. Yeah.
We only have about looks like 13 minutes left. Should we open this up to Q&A, or is there anything else you'd like to?
Yeah, so I've seen thank you guys for all the questions. So I'll try to go through as many questions as we can. So you've sent more than 400 questions. So I'll share the questions with Adrian of a team after the event, and we'll reach out personally so that you'll have opportunities to book consultation with us. But we'll go through some of those.
Fabien, we have almost 1,000 people live on this webinar, which is a record for me. I don't think that's a record for you. But clearly, everybody out there is seriously interested in making a change in their lives. And if they do, it will be for the better. I can promise everyone that. I certainly wouldn't trade it. I'm in paradise. I'm in Maui, but it's for a few weeks, not a few years.
Yeah, no, it's and honestly, again, I think and also there's some cultural differences, which in a way I find almost romantic. Like for example, in France, you're supposed to say bonjour to pretty much anywhere you go, even if you go
everywhere, all the time,
to the doctor's office and in the waiting room, it's full of people you don't know. You're supposed to say bonjour, and actually, everyone would say bonjour back.
Exactly, of course.
Because it made me laugh. Like just this morning at noon, we were having the boulangerie, and so we were there. 3 people came in, and all in a row, like bonjour, bonjour, bonjour.
Bonjour,
bonjour. Saying bonjour to each other. It was like an echo chamber, but it made me laugh because it was like a bit ridiculous, but it was nice.
Okay, but then you can say, if you go out and you come back in, you can go rebonjour.
Oh yeah,
hello again.
Au revoir.
Yeah.
So no, people would be welcoming you with open arms most of the time. But yeah, we'll try to birth through some of your questions. Okay, I'll try to read through the anonymous ones because we can't answer those because we won't have a way to reach out. Rentals can be difficult to find in our experience. The laws clearly do not protect the landlords in ways that give them comfort. This is true, unfortunately.
That's right.
But I think you
So,
help them
so
find rental accommodation as
Oh,
well,
I
too.
can talk to this. Basically, the laws favor the tenants, and so therefore the landlords have to protect themselves, which makes it more and more difficult to actually find and secure rental apartments. And there's a housing shortage, particularly in cities like Paris and Nice. So finding the apartments and securing the apartments is very difficult. But we have the ability to do this. I've got a couple of really crackerjack people on my team who have created some fantastic relationships with the agencies, and the agencies love our clients. Americans are honest Abes, okay? They don't squat. They do pay their rent. They treat the property well. They're great tenants, and the smart landlords know this. And because of my agents who work with the other agencies so well, we have a really high success rate of finding good rental properties.
That's good.
But if you
Yeah.
try to do it on your own, very tough. Very, very tough to do.
Oh, actually, Kimberly is asking, if large numbers of Americans move to France, do you think that it will become more difficult in the future? Well, personally, I don't, apart from waiting times to book appointments and stuff.
Yeah,
What is
yeah.
your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of the ability for the consulate to actually process the visas. It might take a little bit longer,
Oh,
but we don't
actually,
know.
there's a question. Do you think the recent election result in the US will affect the political situation in France? I think, if anything, for me, the only thing where it will have an impact with France is not about visas or immigration or any of that, but I think there might be some sort of an economical war, like the former like US first that Trump was saying back in 2016. That's what might happen because I've seen Macron's speech today, and he's trying to say, okay, Europe should be more independent from the US, and that was today. So I think, if anything, there's going to be some sort of an economic war, but not as bad as like US China, for example, like something a bit like
Mm,
more like a Cold War, you know. Like,
mm.
well, that's just personal opinion, but that's,
It's
from what I've heard about
it's going to
Macron
be
today, is Macron's speech. Yeah.
Well, it's going to be real interesting to see how all this plays out. I mean, if Kamala Harris had been elected, things probably would not have changed much, and it would take her time to change things internally. But with Donald Trump, as I said, he's a wild card. We
Um,
really don't know what to actually expect.
um,
So it's going to be very interesting.
yeah, no, it's well, but I mean, I'm positively enthusiastic about this because I really think, again, in terms of our industry, immigration, and and moving to France in general, I don't foresee any change in the actually in the near future, and then we'll see. But
Listen, there's one thing for sure. If you really want to, like get out of the US, you got to get your visas now so that ultimately you can get your passport. So that
yeah,
then if
that is
you
even
really
sorry.
wanted to renounce American citizenship, you could.
Uh,
Not that I'm not necessarily in favor of that. I'm just, so
yeah, no.
you got to move ahead.
Genevieve is asking, would there be a recording of this webinar? So yes, and we'll be sending you a link
Right.
in hopefully tomorrow or in a couple of days, but very quickly you'll have all the info. And also I'll share the recording with Adrian and the team, so they'll probably post this
And
on
then I'll have it on my
it.
YouTube.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll have
there
it
you
on
go.
my YouTube channel. Right.
So give us just a couple of days, but it will be online as well. So if you want to rewatch this.
Okay.
Um,
Other juicy questions?
oh, Kimberly's asking, what kind of pets are considered dangerous? Is there an online link defining this? I have a German
Dangerous
Shepherd mix.
pets?
Dangerous pets. Yeah.
Dangerous pets? Like alligators or
No, I think she's mentioning. Yeah, we do have
certainly
things
not
we call
dogs
that
and cats.
categories. Like we have dogs, like breeds, which are considered category one, category two,
Mm-mm.
which do require either a license or permit. But basically, I mean, the rule of thumb with pets is quite simple. Actually just go to a local vet, and we can even help you with that. You just go to a local vet, and the vet will double check everything is up to date, like vaccines and stuff, and it basically boils down to rabies. And if it's like considered an attack dog, or like a dangerous kind of dog, then they'll tell you how to fix this. Like you'll have 30 days to get your duck lines in a row. if you require any documentation. So
And
that's going
they
to be
put the
fine.
little chip in, and then they get a sweet little passport. It's really cute.
Well, it's actually much easier to get a passport as a dog than it is
Dog.
as a human being. So, yeah.
Oh,
So
goodness.
yeah,
Okay, what else?
if there are
What
some
else?
dogs in the audience, then you can come to France. Easy for you,
Right.
but maybe not for your master though. How do you decide? Oh, this one's interesting. Maureen's asking, how do you decide which area to move to France? It's a bit of a personal question,
Oh,
but Adrian.
it's my favorite subject. It's my favorite subject, where to live in France. We've done a lot of webinars about how to decide where to live in France. And I have very strongly held opinions about this, mainly because everywhere you go, you're going to fall in love. I mean, France is beautiful. I don't care what town you go to, you're going to imagine yourself living there. And I think about Peter Mayle and what I call the Peter Mayle syndrome, and that's that idea of, living in some sweet little village in a stone cottage that you've renovated, and just the whole idea of that. But for me, the bottom line is practical, because if you want to travel, which you have the opportunity to travel easily, quickly, inexpensively, then you should be near an international airport. And the international airports are Paris, Marseille, and Nice. So that's number one, is being near an airport or being near a good train hub.
Or Bordeaux for that matter. Yeah.
Well, no, I disagree with Bordeaux completely, because when you're in Bordeaux, if you want to travel from Bordeaux, you basically either have to take a train to Paris, or you're always going to have to take a puddle jumper plane to somewhere else before you can get anywhere.
Well,
And
depends where
you're
you want to
stuck
go.
on the
Yeah.
well, you're stuck on the west side of France, and the only option there is Spain. If you're on the east side of France, then you have easier access into more countries. You have easier access into Italy and Switzerland and
this is
Luxembourg and
controversial because
Germany. And
that's I think the audience needs to know that. I mean, well, I've lived in all parts of France, everywhere. I've lived in Paris, I've lived in Nice. Well, apart from the northern east of France, although I have family in Burgundy. But well, actually, it's exactly like the US. West and east of France kind of can't stand each other, so it's a completely different mindset.
Well, but there's
and
also a
culture.
mountain range in between, so you can't cross over easily. So if you're in Bordeaux to get to Nice, you have to go to Paris to get to Nice because of the mountain range. Okay, so there's a physical aspect to it, and then there's
the small mountains. The small mountains.
Let me go back to this idea. Okay, what people have to realize is they have to consider climate, they have to consider not being in a medical desert, they have to consider healthcare, they have to consider having a good American community so that they can integrate easily and quickly. They should consider easy access. They should consider where they can live without owning and operating a car. These are the things that really ultimately make for a happy life. So if you consider all the basic aspects, not just the emotional, oh my God, I fell in love with, okay, if they really think about all of those things, then they could establish themselves in one place that fulfills all their wishes. So I do have a hierarchy of places that I like for different reasons. Yeah, I mean, we have 2 minutes. You want to know what they are?
2, yeah.
Okay, so there's Paris is number 1, cultural mecca of the planet. Anything you need or want is in Paris. It's Paris. I mean, come on, let's face it. Most gorgeous city in the world, most romantic city in the world. 2 is Nice, best climate in France, fantastic public transportation, very easy access, immediate access into Italy, of course, Corsica, Sardinia, Provence, but also you have an international airport there, so you can go anywhere. Has a very large and thriving American community, which is within the last 10 years that's happened. I like all of Provence, but you have to be prepared to have a car. But there's a huge American community in Provence and the Luberon. Believe it or not, I really like Lille. I like Lille because Lille's very inexpensive, but because Lille offers TGV access to Brussels in 30 minutes, Paris in an hour, London in an hour and a half, Amsterdam in 2.5 hours, so that you can literally go to Paris for the day and come home. I mean, it's
Yeah.
fantastic. Or Brussels.
Yeah,
So
but
the TGV access in Lille is amazing, and it has a large Anglophone community,
which
which
is
is
yeah,
all.
which is weird because like for example, the train I've always wondered why isn't like a fast track train from Nice, for example. I mean, there are airports and the roads are
Oh, I can
nice.
tell you that. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's a long story. It has to do, it's political and it has to do with the tracks.
Yeah, but
Okay. Yeah.
Bodo, for example, I mean, Bodo has caught up recently, well, like the past years, because like you can get up on a train and within a couple hours you're in Paris, and that changed Bodo massively the past, and also the renovation work that I've done on the docks. So
Well,
yeah,
yes, there's been a lot of interest in Bordeaux, but Bordeaux is still very much kind of a closed society. The Bordelais are not really interested as much in expats as other cities. Whereas Nice, for example, is a very international city. Strasbourg is a very international city. It's one of my other go-to places because of it being the seat of the EU.
yeah,
It
well,
makes a difference when you have a
yeah,
community.
but the locals, again, well, it depends what you call a community. Obviously, like you
American community, I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, but even that, I mean, from a French perspective, you would be seen as exotic. So, I mean, again, the minute they understand you're living there and you're foreign based, they'll be happy to engage, and that pretty much wherever you are in France. And then the difference is whether you are in a much or less cosmopolitan city, more or less culturally vibrant city as well. So obviously, if there aren't that many cultural events, well, it's difficult to connect with people and to meet people because, like, what would you do? Like, go in a bar?
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, no, wait. It is now we're beyond our hour. Okay,
Yeah.
but why don't we try to answer one more question? And then you had mentioned, I think, that we're going to have all these questions. So you and I can then go back and try to answer
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
via our
I mean, we reach out
newsletters.
over email. I think one
Right.
question, which is probably a burning question for a lot of people, is it allowed to work for a US company remotely from France on a long-term visa? Well,
Oh, I can answer. Can I answer that?
yeah, yeah, sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
Because when you apply for a visitor visa, they ask you to sign a document saying you're not going to work in France. Okay, but what that really means is that you're not going to take a job away from a French national. That's really what that means. There is absolutely zero reason that you cannot continue doing what you do US based while your tushy is sitting in France. Okay. So if you're earning money on the US side, it's all a matter of reporting it and paying your taxes. There's absolutely no reason why you cannot work remotely.
That's a very interesting point because it's a question I hear quite a lot. It's like, oh, well, like we have free healthcare, or what should I do? How much time I'm allowed to be outside of France? Questions around this topic, basically. And I like to say, basically, you're in France, you're not in jail. Actually, France is super flexible with visa and residency. So actually, France doesn't bat an eye, whatever you're actually
No, you you
traveling
go and
around.
come as you like. Right. You go
The
and come
only
as
thing
you
that
like.
France wants, though, I mean, the rule of thumb here is very simple. France just wants you to be filing taxes in France if you get the French benefits. That's it. Even if you end up being tax exempt, they don't care, but at least you're filing your taxes.
No, your tax return is going to have a zero on it.
Yeah.
Okay. And they actually don't care because it wastes their time to even process a tax return with a zero on it. But there's no issue with it whatsoever, and
Um,
everyone needs to know
that
that. I also have a very surefire way of setting yourself up on the U.S. side to be really 100% clean and to manage it, which we help our clients do. And that, I'm not going to go into the detail of it here, but we can help them
there's a
with that.
question that I've seen recently, and I think unless it means something else, but I've seen Kenny ask the question: have the new visa regulations been finalized, and will you be discussing that? I think this is a misconception, but maybe I get the question wrong. There's no new visa. Well, at least last time they spoke about visas
No.
and immigration was in January 2024. But the new regulation that's going forward in France and Europe is called the ETIAS, which is the equivalent of the US ESTA, supposed to start on the 1st of January 2025. But that's not a visa. It's basically, well, now, if you travel to France, you don't need anything. In theory, from the 1st of January 2025, you'll need to file an ESTA request or approval, which is again same as the ESTA in the US, much more simple. And that's it. And it's supposed to be enforced for everyone. Like there is a grace period up until the 1st of July 2025. But in regard to the state of the ESTA in the EU in that regard, I don't think they're ready. But the theoretical framework is this one. So it's not a visa. Yeah. And if you have a visa, it's not required for you to get an ESTA, okay? It's basically for those who don't have legal allowance to travel in the Schengen zone.
Right, exactly.
So those who have a residence permit or a visa is not required.
We should probably wrap this up, right? Because we're over time. I mean, we could, you and I, we could go on all day talking about all of these things.
All night for me. But yeah.
Oh yeah, for all night for you, all day for me, right? Because it's so early for me.
We're getting past apéro time, so it's getting important.
So anyone who wants to write to us, if they go on our website, adrianleeds.com, or subscribe to our Nouvelle Lettre, we publish 3 newsletters a week, and so there's a tremendous amount of information in them. They can unsubscribe at any time. And then there's a form on our site to request a consultation. It's under the rubric under the category of contact. And for you, Fabien, the best way is just to go to your website as well?
Yeah, no, we'll send you a newsletter. That would be even easier. So to all the registrants, and we'll include Adrian's details and obviously our details. Great. Well, you can go onto Fab French Insurance for insurance-related stuff, or on Fab Expat if you want to book a consultation, or to register to upcoming webinars as well. But again, we'll send you a newsletter, following newsletter. That would be easier probably for all of you guys. Thank you so much, Adrian, for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Fabien. Thank you so much. And I want to thank all of the viewers out there who are sending up. I see lots of little
Thank you for the love.
Applause. And boy, it's like exploding. And it's really heartwarming.
That goes straight to my heart. I mean, maybe not all of you guys, but if you ever come near to Bordeaux, you're free to come to have a glass of wine or coffee, depending, because if you're too many, maybe coffee is less expensive. Well, I'm happy to have you around.
Thank you again. Goodbye, everybody. See you soon.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye. Cheers.